the madhouse, Batman!
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we're doing it again. We're going back to another era of comic book video games. I swear, once you all watched that Raimi Spider-Man video, you unleashed a whole different beast in me. I grew up on these superhero games, and I got many more to go through. And since you keep watching them, I'm going to keep doing them. Today, we go back to a pretty familiar era of Batman video games, what I would call the best era of Batman video games. Now, for those who didn't check it out, we recently reflected on another excellent era of Batman video games, one much further back on the PS2 era, where we talked about Batman Vengeance, Batman Rise of Sin Tzu, as well as Batman Begins. And then we got into other Batman video games. Kemco. That was fun though, and I thought to myself, with so many of you tuning in, that of course we got to take it one step further and throw it back to the Batman games that started it all. That's right, the Batman Arkham series. So we got all of them, including that one hidden gem that never gets enough credit. You know if you know, we'll be talking about the entire Arkham series here in this video. So if you're new here, I know normally I say if you like retro content, consider subscribing, but if you like throwback content, that's another reason to subscribe. We do a lot of throwbacks here. We just talked about Web of Shadows. We're talking about these old Batman games. It's been a great time here on Retro Rebound, so thank you so much for your support. Let's talk about the Arkham series, starting with the one that started it all. That's right, Arkham Asylum. Now, you may be looking at this like I'm a dang psychopath saying, Maddie, this is a PS3 game. There is an HD remaster on current consoles. Why do you own this? Why do you have this? Why did you buy it? Joke's on you, pal. I like to get the complete in-box experience at the sake of frame rate and resolution. I don't speak that technical language you speak. Anyway, I wanted to, as always, provide the most authentic experience. You pull this game off the shelf in 2009. What do you get? This is it. And I thought this was the best version because it came with the exclusive Joker Challenge map. Now, we're going to unbox it. We're going to talk about each of these games individually. Starting off, as always, with the back. Welcome to the madhouse. Descend into the core of criminally insane as the Joker launches his most diabolical plot ever. The inmates of Arkham Asylum have been set free, and it's up to Batman to bring order to the chaos and take back the asylum. Explore the depths of this never-before-seen island as you experience the darkest journey of Batman's life. Written by Paul Dini and featuring voice talent of Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy. Another reason why I always shout out Batman Vengeance. I'm like, y'all were celebrating this in 2009 when this was happening in like 2001. The back also says, play as the Joker in the challenge maps exclusively on PS3. Confront Gotham City's most notorious lunatics, including the Joker, Harley Quinn, Bane, Poison Ivy, and Killer Croc. Utilize Batman's detective skills and cutting-edge forensic technology, as well as unleashing brutal combos with the innovative free-flow combat system. Okay, so you pull this off the store shelves in 2009. Here's what you'd open it up to, and this game's got itself a nice manual. It's nice and thick is what I mean. Obviously, the inside, much like every Batman game we've talked about on this channel so far, black and white, black and white, black and white. But hey, the thickness is good, and I also like the connection here with the art. See how it's just one side, and then boom, it continues on the back. I do like that quite a bit. But overall, standard manual describes your in-game experiences. This was towards the near death of game manuals, so they weren't printing color on them. It was pretty rare to see stuff like that. But I think it was warranted to have this because there were so many new, unfamiliar mechanics in this Batman game that it was like, you know what? We got to explain all this stuff. So what was new about this? Well, first things first, like it mentioned on the back, free flow combat. Free flow combat was a moment unlike any other, where Batman was able to stream back and forth between all foes of shapes and sizes and just kick butt across the room. There was a rhythm, a heartbeat to the combat that we had never seen before that really made you feel truly badass. It defined the entire series. It was so good that they made effectively 3 sequels and evolved on this system with each step, and it never got old. And it was so good that a Lord of the Rings series known as Shadow of Mordor actually borrowed the free flow combat system to use in a different way. Mad Max borrowed the free flow combat system to provide this post-apocalyptic flair with elbow breakers, neck breakers, all that crazy stuff. Free flow was a actual movement. It all started here in 2009. So many games would go on to try to imitate it. Remember when I talked about Spider-Man 2, the Raimi Spider-Man 2 video game, how every game, including Spider-Man games, would always try to be Spider-Man 2. That's what Free Flow Combat did. Every single superhero game ever tried to be free flow, because this was when we were in an era that it was shocking to have a game on a AAA level that was this good, right? And this high budget for a comic book character. It's not like nowadays where everyone's getting their own spin-off shows, subscription services, video games. They're working out really well. This was in a time where, yes, I've talked about many good superhero games here on this channel, but this was like a video game industry movement. Like, everyone was talking about Batman Arkham Asylum. It was a must-play experience because it wasn't just about the combat as well. It was a game that embraced the detective side of Batman because you had the detective technology here. You could scan enemies. As you saw, a lot of things that were built in Batman Begins start to be brought into this game here and evolved upon. That's why I always say Batman Begins, in hindsight, doesn't get the roses it deserves, because what you see in this game, that game did start a lot of it. The smoothness of flowing combat, while it didn't have a trademark free flow feeling, this game took that and built upon it. When you look at the fear system that was in Batman Begins, this game took that and built upon that. So I feel like this game, of course, gets Batman, just like I'd say the movie that just came out gets Batman, and that's why it resonated with so many people. Of course, the other thing that we got to talk about is this is when Rocksteady stepped into the building and said, we've got the Caped Crusader. We got him. Is that what they call Batman? Is that what they call Superman? Caped Crusader. Anyway, we got Batman is what they said. We got our man in the mask. We are going to do him justice, and they did just that. One of my favorite parts with this game was how they played with your head a little bit as you crawled through Arkham Asylum, and his costume started to get torn up over time. And there's that one part with Scarecrow, and he was a pretty, if I remember correctly, significant aspect of this story mode. But when you were just fighting this giant Scarecrow and it was a lot of hallucinating, I dug that, man. And I hope that there's a Batman movie on the big screen one year that really, outside of Batman Begins, takes full advantage of the Scarecrow. Like, I think a sequel to The Batman with Scarecrow in it would be, oh my God, so good. Because that movie was kind of creepy. So to take the Scarecrow who just messes with your mind and do that is kind of like how Far From Home did Mysterio. Anyway, let's move on to the next Batman game, the one that I think everyone deigns the best Batman game of all time. I would happen to agree. We're going to talk about Batman Arkham City. So we go from a game that was set in Arkham Asylum, where it was this almost Metroidvania-like experience, to now a living, breathing, open world Batman game set at nighttime. So let's read the back. There is no escape from Arkham City, the sprawling mega prison in the heart of Gotham City, home to its most violent thugs and infamous supervillains. With the lives of innocent civilians at stake, only one man can save them and bring them justice, and that is Batman. So you pop this sucker open. Again, we got the manual. We also got, check this out, an ad for Gotham City's imposters. I mean, this game was actually kind of decent. There's a code on the back, which gets you free Arkham City themed content for the game. I actually enjoyed this hero shooter. I thought it was a good time, but I get why it didn't ever get the legs that it probably needed. And it's a game that I don't know why it ever existed, but it does. If you ever want to check it out, I think you can still play it. So it came with a promotion for that. It came with this here, this kind of pamphlet that is really unfortunate because Fallout 3 did a similar thing, this like tri-fold manual. So it has that. And then the actual manual itself, which has a bunch of promotions for wall posters, calendars, the Batman files, hats, music albums, action figures, you name it, it's in here. So they said, we don't even care about promoting what's in the game. We have that handled. Let's just make a whole ad pamphlet and throw that in there. So those are the three things you'd get there. Of course, that was to the dismay of many at the time, but for me as a collector, I see it and I'm like, oh, what a cool little trinket. And then, of course, disc looking good as always on the right side. So that's what came complete in box in 2011. This is when Batman was on a 2-year cadence, and it was kind of crazy because we were getting some really, really good games. Batman Arkham City was so much of an emotional moment for me. I remember I was in high school. I came home with this game, and I beat it in 2 days. Like, I came home, it was like 3. I played it till 8. Next day, came home at 3. Played it for another couple hours, and it was done. The game's not that long, which is really refreshing It's something that a lot of the industry left behind at that time, saying, hey, we can make open world games that don't have to be 80 hours long. I don't mind an Elden Ring, but that doesn't have to be every game. So Batman Arkham City was nice from that standpoint. Like, hey, let's make a game that's a nice, concise Batman story. But what was awesome is you could play as Catwoman, and she was fun to explore with in the open world. This is where I think challenge maps really popped off, because you started to see the different costumes you could wear. You would have Catwoman that you could use in some of the challenge maps. You could also see challenge maps in Arkham Asylum, where this is a way to just test your combat mettle. You could, of course, test your stealth, all that stuff. But this is the game that I think really honed that mode best. But there's just so much to say about the open world, because I love how they made sense of there being an open world Batman game while confining that space you were in. So you would be in this city-like prison, because that was the only way to trap all of these different criminals there. And it was, yeah, effectively a city of criminals. I thought this was so awesome. And the ending, I'm not going to spoil it in case no one's played it, but oh my word, what a plot twist. What a absolute plot twist. I never expected this. That ending has always sat with me. Completely stunned. In a year where Skyrim came out, it's amazing I remember any other games that came out, but Batman Arkham City is one of the absolute few that are there. And the relationship between Batman and Catwoman is also really good, kind of reminiscent of what we saw recently in the Batman. Also, another thing I loved was all the secrets you discover, because they had like now this main story route, which was about the Joker and what's going on in Arkham City. And then they had these side routes like Mr. Freeze you would discover, or I think Zast, like one of the killers you could find on the phone lines ringing randomly in Arkham City. I love those little Easter eggs there that you could discover. It was, to me, so cool. As a longtime Batman video game fan and movie fan, I can't act like I was a comic fan for my whole life. I just appreciated what this game did so much. But if there's one that I appreciate just as much, only in spite, because no one appreciates it nearly enough. It's a game that gets swept under the rug. The developer of the studio never got its roses. Now they're working on Gotham Knights. You already know what I'm talking about. Batman Arkham Origins. This one, when it got like 7 out of 10s, I was infuriated. I couldn't believe it. So, let's read the back, and then I'm going to rant. Your enemies will define you. The Black Mask's assassin face off against the 8 deadliest assassins in the DC universe as they compete for a $50 million prize on Batman's head. You'll prowl the streets again of Gotham City like you did in Arkham City, expanding your arsenal and equipping the versatile remote claw and devastating shock gloves as you stalk the city streets and take down your enemies in exciting new ways. Also, a world of firsts. Experience Batman's first encounters with some of his greatest allies and enemies. So you may be wondering why I waited to talk about like the tech you could use in the free flow combat system. Why didn't I bring it up here in Arkham City? I wanted to wait until we got into Arkham Origins, because this game, I'm sorry, I'm already skipping the part where you can open it up. Yeah, it's a crummy manual, as you can see here, and then you got some DLC stuff here with the Deathstroke challenge pack. We'll talk about all of that in a moment, but I'm sorry, I need to get into this. This is an emotional moment for me, because Batman Arkham Origins was wronged. Now, as I said, I didn't mention the technology aspect of the free flow combat system, where you could start to put like your explosive gel on the ground and use it to stun enemies. This game with the remote claw, pulling people towards you, pulling yourself towards them, yanking shields down, using your shock gloves to just like, oh my God. It was so good. I think this was at the pinnacle of Arkham combat design, where they didn't have too many different enemy types, where I felt like you were constantly fumbling with the buttons, like, oh, I need LB and B for that enemy, and I need Y for this enemy, and RT and X for this one over here. And there was just so many hotkeys for different enemy types by Arkham Knight that I feel like Arkham Origins was the perfect free flow combat system. It had a great diversity of enemies. The way they handled those combat encounters was just right, and they had the biggest arsenal you had access to. It kicked butt. Now, for those who don't know, the story of Arkham Origins was that this was the origin story of Batman. And this is where they really explored that detective mode where you were analyzing crime scenes, rewinding time. I remember it was a ton of beef in the industry on why do you have all this technology now, but in Arkham Asylum in City, you don't have that. That's not right. I'm like, do you want a more boring game? Is that what we're asking for right now? Really? Who cares? He lost the technology. Let's just write it off. Who cares? This game has great detective investigation moments, which again captures a side of Bruce Wayne that not many games got right. And then the villain performance with Black Mask. I really thought that Troy Baker did a good job here. And I thought it was surprising because this was like in the infancy of Troy Baker popping off. And so that was a pleasant surprise, but also just Black Mask as a villain and the first encounters with all these villains that you were familiar with throughout all of the Arkham games, to me was awesome. I really enjoyed how it was all introduced to you. And then what also really completes this experience to me is, of course, yes, it's effectively just more Batman Arkham. I don't think that's a bad thing. This is especially when Batman Arkham was like in a really good spot. So more of that wasn't bad. And since it was an origin story, he was more brutal, like hanging people by their legs off the buildings. Like that was a different type of Batman then, more vengeance guided. I love that feeling there. But there's also this one right here, Arkham Origins Blackgate. Now, it did come out for the Nintendo 3DS as well, but you know me, PS Vita stand, gotta get my PS Vita copy. This one was very different. Become the Batman, investigate the scene, continue the Arkham storyline to see what happens after the events of Arkham Origins console game in an innovative 2.5D presentation and comic book cutscenes. You open it up, all you got here is just the cartridge. This game was a Metroidvania Batman game that was a sequel effectively to Arkham Origins. Was it perfect? No, but it was one of those moments that was where the Vita shined for me, is these follow-ups, these sequels, these experiences that were tailored to this console. Incredible stuff, because I think the Vita was so underutilized because developers were trying to develop budget-based console games on the Vita, which was way too expensive for the player base that really wasn't there, so they'd go and make it for the PS3, but no one tried to make tiny spin-off games like they did, Warner Bros. Montreal, for the Vita, and they got it. They got a good one here, I thought. Was it incredible? No. Did it have its snags? Absolutely. But again, I think hindsight 2020, you can look at this and say, I'm so happy this exists. It's a very unique Batman experience. I think Metroidvania fits the series really well. The biggest problem with this game was trying to take things that were best fit in a 3D world, like stealth, like creeping up on your enemies, and trying to make it work in 2.5D. For those who don't know what 2.5D is, effectively means like sometimes you'll turn a corner and the camera will rotate, but you're always typically on a 2D plane. But this game was really, really cool, especially for its time. I mean, I know it's not that big of a throwback. This was, I want to say 2013 as well. It came out alongside Arkham Origins. Yes, it was. But I really liked it from day one. And having it on Vita, complete in box, if you will, complete in box, it's an honor, truly. Now, the last game, unfortunately, I don't have a case for. I don't know how this slipped me, but I wanted to record this video anyway. And when I looked it up, it didn't come with any slips. It was just the disc. So it was much like this again, just all I'd show you is the case. But of course, we got to talk about Arkham Knight, which came out in 2015. So when you look at the whole spread of Batman games, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2013, and then in 2015, we got Arkham Knight. Like, we were smothered with Batman games. And this was at the point where some people were getting tired of it. Me? Certainly not. Here's your hot take for the video. I remember when Batman Arkham Knight came out, it was, I want to say, a month after The Witcher 3. That was the game that was capturing everyone. I love The Witcher 3, but I was not done with The Witcher 3 at that point. I dropped it. I played another 2 months worth of Arkham Knight because I really liked that game a ton. And then I went back and finished Witcher 3 in August. I really dug Arkham Knight. A lot of people really pooped on it, so to say, for its predictable story elements. So for those who don't know, in this game, Batman's dealing with some demons because of things that have occurred in Arkham City specifically. It's really following him now, and literally following him in some hallucinations with the Joker. And him having this mental battle and the appearance of Red Hood, I really do love how this game presents a mental war for Batman. And did he make the right call? Is he a killer? These types of things to me are so intriguing and humanize the hero behind the mask. So, of course, it's your standard open world Batman game with free flow combat, bigger than it's ever been, better than it's ever been for a lot of people. But the real defining quality that also hurt the game was the Batmobile. So now in this game, finally, instead of floating around on your cape and zipping everywhere, you could get inside the Batmobile and you could ride around the world and say, like, hey, world, what's going on? Shoot rubber bullets at everyone and say that Batman didn't kill anyone. It definitely broke that suspended disbelief of, I think he's alive. He shouldn't be dead there. To like, oh, I'm just shooting them with missiles now, but they're sleep missiles, so I guess they're alive. Sure. But it didn't matter again because it was pretty cool because you could call it in and there were a lot of missions based off of it. And that's where it went wrong because driving around the Batmobile in the city felt so cool. It was just a dream come true. As someone who grew up playing Batman Vengeance where you had to use your bat grapple to whip around corners and it was just obtuse. It was a weirdly designed system. It felt great to have a Batmobile that you could well and truly drive around in open world. I know we saw that with Batman Begins where you could get in the Batmobile and it was by a racing game studio in some manner. So there was some pretty good driving there, but it was in a confined space. Now you could drive around the open world. It was just that they overused it and it hurt the game. And now it's funny because you look at Rocksteady, they haven't released a game in now 7 years and it might be 8 years because apparently the new Suicide Squad game got delayed. But Arkham Knight was the final Batman game. And I don't think people were really prepared for a full-on send-off because when the game ended, if you got the secret ending, which I did, you would see that there was a nightmare Batman at the end. And some people thought more was on the way. And when you look at how long it's been since their last game, I would imagine that was the plan, but they changed it. There's, of course, Arkham VR. I don't have that either. I want to throw that out there as just an honorary mention. But that one was really cool. I remember playing that at E3 2016, and my mind was blown. That was my first experience with VR. And I remember seeing the death of Nightwing, I think it was, and just being rattled by it in a loud convention center. I was like, oh my God. He didn't just die there. He just got the life kicked out of him. Terrible. But there's been so many great Batman Arkham video games. I think all of them are strong for their different reasons. And that's what I really wanted to celebrate in this video. A lot of people tear down the Arkham series, whether it be Origins or Arkham Knight. And to me, it's a lot like the Fallout series where I talk about that a ton, where people are like, oh, it's Fallout 3. Oh, it's New Vegas. No, it's the OG Fallout games. I'm like, they're all just good for their own reasons. We can talk about which one's better, but that's subjective. There's no, in my opinion, definitive list for this group of games here because they're all great for different reasons because they all capture different time periods and philosophies of design. Like, I can't say wholeheartedly, like, Arkham Asylum is worse than Arkham Knight just because Arkham City is in an open world. Like, Arkham Asylum has a lot going for it in a more condensed nature, the introduction of it all. There's something very special about that. So to me, they're all great. Love them all. Shout out to all my Batman games. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much again for sitting down for another Batman video. I hope you enjoyed this trip back in the past of some wonderful Batman video games and maybe unboxing some of these copies brought back some memories for you. Let me know, what is your favorite Batman Arkham game down below? Just don't go arguing with others. I'll be on watch. And with that, take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you all in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.